Now let's again talk about what happens when the global economy runs on a single choke point and that choke point gets squeezed. Because right now, that choke point remains the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through it, and thanks to the ongoing Iran war, that flow has been disrupted. The result? Gas prices in the U.S. have jumped about 50% since the conflict began, climbing into the mid-$4 range nationally. Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy, says, quote, "It probably could take beyond a year for gas prices to get back down to pre-war levels." Now, ending the conflict with Iran would not mean that oil inventories would suddenly flood overnight, he said. It will take many months to catch up to rapidly declining oil inventories, including those in the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, that's bad, but it's just gas. No, it's never just gas. Gas is the pressure point. It's how a geopolitical conflict shows up in your checking account. Because when energy prices spike, everything else follows. Transportation costs go up, food prices creep higher, and suddenly the same paycheck covers less life. Economists are already warning that this kind of oil shock could tip the U.S. toward a broader slowdown or even recession territory if it drags on. And here's the part that should sound familiar. The economy looked like it was holding together just fine before this. Hiring had actually picked up recently. But dig a little deeper, and the labor market was already fragile, what analysts are calling a low-hire, low-fire economy. Employers weren't laying people off en masse, but they weren't exactly eager to hire either. Now layer a war-driven energy shock on top of that hesitation. And what do businesses do? They freeze. They wait. They delay hiring, delay expansion, delay risk. Because uncertainty is the enemy of investment. And right now, uncertainty is basically the main export of global capitalism. And as a matter of fact, a deeper look at April's jobs report suggested the U.S. labor market may be weaker than the headline numbers indicate. While payroll data showed stronger than expected job growth, Reuters reported that employment measured through the household survey has actually fallen by more than 1.3 million so far this year, while the labor force has shrunk by roughly 700,000 since early 2025. Labor force participation has now declined for 5 straight months, helping keep the unemployment rate artificially stable at 4.3%. Reuters noted that the labor market is increasingly dependent on a shrinking pool of available workers rather than broad hiring strength. The report also showed job growth becoming increasingly narrow, concentrated mostly in healthcare and service industries, while manufacturing and other sectors struggled. Factory employment fell again in April, continuing a broader decline that Reuters linked to trade uncertainty and slowing economic momentum. Analysts warn that the combination of weaker household employment data, declining participation, and uneven hiring suggests the labor market may not be as strong as the payroll figures imply. So the foundation is shaky. One external shock, like say a war that sends oil prices soaring, and suddenly that progress stalls out. And here's the bigger picture we don't talk about enough. This isn't a bug in the system, of course. It is the system. We've built an economy where working people are downstream from global supply chains, corporate pricing power, and geopolitical conflict. You don't control oil markets. You don't control shipping lanes. But you absolutely feel the consequences when they break. Meanwhile, some sectors, energy traders, major oil companies, can actually profit from the volatility. The chaos is expensive for workers, but it's often lucrative for capital. So when gas jumps 50%, it's not just a story about fuel, it's a story about power. Who has it? Who absorbs the shocks? And who gets squeezed every time the system hits turbulence? And that's not just geopolitics, that's design. A system so efficient, it can turn war into profit and your paycheck into collateral damage. And here's a telling observation. According to Yahoo Finance, a growing majority of Americans are more afraid of running out of money in retirement than of dying, highlighting a sharp rise in financial anxiety tied to inflation, healthcare costs, and economic uncertainty. Citing recent survey data, nearly 7 in 10 Americans have this worry, reflecting a significant increase in concern compared to just a few years ago. These fears are driven by factors such as volatile markets, uncertainty around Social Security, and the challenge of funding longer lifespans, with many Americans lacking clear financial plans to navigate retirement. The article emphasizes that this anxiety cuts across income levels and generations, underscoring a broader sense of insecurity about long-term financial stability in the current economic climate. And speaking of gas prices, what about that car payment? According to CNBC, rising car prices, high interest rates, and longer loan terms are putting significant financial pressure on American households, with auto debt reaching record levels and monthly payments consuming a growing share of income. Many buyers are stretching loans to 6, 7, or even more years just to make payments manageable, but this often increases total costs and leaves borrowers financially vulnerable. As the report notes, quote, higher interest rates are driving up car payments, while Americans continue taking on larger loans as vehicle prices remain elevated. The result is a widespread affordability squeeze, with more consumers falling behind on payments or struggling to balance car costs alongside other rising expenses, highlighting how transportation, once a routine expense, has become a major source of economic strain. Meanwhile, yeah, you need a new washer and dryer. But an Axios report highlighted how economic anxiety and the frozen housing market are reshaping consumer behavior, with more Americans choosing to repair appliances instead of buying new ones. Appliance giant Whirlpool warned that consumer demand for appliances plunged soon after the war began, describing the downturn as a recession-level industry decline. The slowdown has hit Whirlpool hard. The company slashed its profit forecast for 2026, suspended its dividend, and saw its stock fall to a 14-year low after reporting weak sales and mounting financial pressure. Reuters reported that high interest rates and low housing turnover are reducing demand for appliances tied to home purchases and renovations, while rising energy prices and inflation are making consumers more cautious. Whirlpool executives said consumers are increasingly delaying purchases and opting for repairs instead, a sign that many households are behaving as though the economy is already in a recession. And what if you're in the market for a mate? Do you turn to gamified dating apps that charge ever larger amounts for premium features? Let's say you match with someone and click well enough to go on that first date. Now we're talking about money. And in that sense, another reflection of this economy.
Half of all Americans say that they've been going on fewer dates due to the state of the economy. Nearly half of all single Americans think dating is not financially worth it. The average date in the U.S. costs $189 as of February 2026, which is up 12.5% from 2025. On top of that, 50% of Gen Z and 40% of millennials say the cost of dating gets in the way of reaching their financial goals.
Why would I spend $100 on someone I might not even vibe with?
So we're seeing that there's this increased cost of living, and it's lowering our dating frequency and how we're seeing or perceiving dating. We're seeing people have fewer dinners out, and there's a lower tolerance for higher risk meetups.
Many dating apps are struggling to maintain monthly active users. Wall Street has noticed. The top 2 dating app stocks, Match Group and Bumble, have been on the decline since the end of the pandemic.
So I think it's not just dating, but in general, life becoming more expensive can be an important part of dating and people's ability to find romantic matches.
I think that fundamentally we are looking at broad structural changes that influence people's marriageability or dateability perceptions, both of themselves and of other individuals. And that makes them disinclined to enter into the dating market. For young men in particular, their economic prospects and dating prospects are very much linked and have never, frankly, been more grim.
So what happens when finding love takes more financial risk? Almost everything has gotten more expensive in the past 6 years, and dating's no exception. The typical Gen Z American went on about 9 dates in 2025, and with Gen Z spending about $205 per date on average, that number includes everything such as transportation, clothing, grooming, and what you're actually spending on the date. That works out to roughly $1,845 per year.
Gen Z now ranges from teenagers to people in their late 20s, so there isn't one clean government income figure for the whole generation.
But among full-time workers as of late 2024, median annual earnings were just under $40,000 for ages 16 to 24 and around $59,000 for ages 25 to 34. That means dating accounts for around 3 to nearly 5% of their annual income.
When the cost of living rises, people date much more defensively. They're taking fewer chances and fewer connections are formed.
It's also going to take away from your mental budget, right? You're not going to be able to pay as much attention. You're probably not going to feel as much in mood to feel happy, to channel yourself in the best light. And that's going to take away from your interest in trying to go into these romantic partnerships as well.